Have any of you ever wanted to go on an adventure? Maybe you wanted to become a sailor or an outdoorsman or go climb a mountain. Can a few volunteers please tell me, or can you guys think about what adventures you guys would like to go on in the future? The book we're reading today is My Side of the Mountain, which will be a weekly read-along because it's a chapter book. And as you look at the cover of this book, what kind of adventure do you think our main character is going on? This award-winning novel by Jean Craighead George takes place in two separate locations during the 1950s, New York and the Catskill Mountains. Sam decides to go on his own adventure by leaving his family home in New York and going into the wilderness of the Catskill Mountains all alone. This book teaches a lot about survival skills in the different areas in the mountains Sam uses to live in the wilderness. There are many words that we will come across in this text that we may not be familiar with because they were used in a different time or that we just don't have them in our vocabulary yet. A few examples of that would be gorge, which is a narrow valley between hills or a mountain, and Sam lives in a mountain, so there's going to be gorges. Felled, which means to cut down trees, or other descriptive words from 1950 that we don't really use much anymore, such as fright, which is a sudden intense fear, and trousers, which mean pants. This book is full of different adventures that will help showcase the beauty of the world's nature and how amazing it is to go on an adventure. As we read, keep in the back of your mind how you would feel if you were in Sam's place. I have also given all of you guys, or have a piece of paper in front of you that you can write down different words that you don't know as I read the book or as you follow along in your books. So, My Side of the Mountain. Chapter 1, in which I hole up in a snowstorm. I am on my mountain in a tree home that people have passed without even knowing that I am here. The house is a hemlock tree 6 feet in diameter and must be as old as the mountain itself. I came upon it last summer and dug and burned it out until I made a snug cave in the tree that I now call home. My bed is on the right as you enter and is made of ash slates and covered with deerskin. On the left is a small fireplace about knee-high. It is of clay and stones. It has a chimney that leads the smoke out through a knothole. I chipped out 3 other knotholes to let fresh air in. The air coming in is bitter cold. It must be well below zero outside, and yet I can sit here inside my tree and write with my bare hands. The fire is small too. It doesn't take much fire to warm this tree room. It is the 4th of December, I think. It may be the 5th. I am not sure because I have not recently counted the notches in the aspen pole that is my calendar. I have been just too busy gathering nuts and berries, smoking venison, fish, and small game to keep up with the exact date. The lamp I am writing in by is deer fat, poured into a turtle shell with a strip of my old city trousers for a wick. It snowed all day yesterday and today. I have not been outside since the storm began, and I am bored for the first time since I ran away from home 8 months ago to live off the land. Sam has been away for 8 months. How do you think you would feel if you were away from your family for that long? I am well and healthy. The food is gone. Sometimes I eat turtle soup, and I know how to make acorn pancakes. I keep my supplies in the wall of the tree in a wooden pockets that I chopped myself. Every time I have looked at those pockets during the last 2 days, I have felt as though like a squirrel, which reminds me, I didn't see a squirrel one whole day before the storm began. I guess they are holed up and eating their stored nuts too. I wonder if the Baron, that's the wild weasel who lives behind the big boulder to the north of my tree, is also denned up. Well, anyway, I think the storm is dying down because the tree is not crying so much. When the wind really blows, the whole tree moans right down to the roots, which is where I am. Tomorrow I hope the Baron and I can tunnel out into the sunlight. I wonder if I should dig the snow, but that would mean I would have to put it somewhere, and the only place to put it is in my nice snug tree. Maybe I can pack it with my hands as I go. I've always dug into the snow from the top, but never up from under. The Baron must dig up from under the snow. I wonder where he puts what he digs. Well, I guess I'll know in the morning. When I wrote that letter last winter, I was scared and thought maybe I'd never get out of my tree. This is a journal entry from a whole year ago. I wonder how much Sam has changed in that year and why Sam was so scared of that first winter. I had been scared for 2 days, ever since the first blizzard hit the Catskill Mountains. When I came up to the sunlight, which I did by simply poking my head into the soft snow and standing up, I laughed at my dark fears. Sam laughs? Have you ever been so scared of something, but later realized it wasn't so bad? Everything was white, clean, shining, and beautiful. The sky was blue, blue, blue. The hemlock grove was laced with snow, the meadow was smooth and white, and the gorge was sparkling with ice. It was so beautiful and peaceful that I laughed out loud. I guess I laughed because my first snowstorm was over and it had not been so terrible after all. Then I shouted, "I did it!" My voice never got very far. It was hushed by all of the tons of snow. I looked for signs of the Baron Weasel. His footprints were all over the boulder, also slides where he had played. He must have been up for hours, enjoying the new snow. Inspired by his fun, I poked out my head into my tree and whistled. Frightful, my trained falcon flew to my fist, and we jumped and slid down the mountain, making holes and trenches as we went. Sam has a trained falcon? I wonder how he was able to train a bird. It was good to be whistling and carefree again, because I was sure scared of that coming of the storm. I had been working since May, learning how to make a fire with flint and steel, finding what plants I could eat, how to trap animals and catch fish. All this so when the curtain of blizzard struck the Catskills, I would crawl inside my tree and be comfortably warm and have plenty to eat. During the summer and fall, I had thought about the coming winter. However, on that third day of December, when the sky blackened and the temperature dropped and the first flakes swirled around me, I must admit that I wanted to run back to New York. Even the first night that I spent out in the woods, when I couldn't get the fire started, was not as frightening as the snowstorm that gathered behind the gorge and mushroomed up over the mountain. I was smoking 3 trout. It was 9 o'clock in the morning. I was busy keeping the flames low so that they would not leap up and burn the fish. As I worked, it occurred to me that it was awfully dark for that hour of the morning. Frightful was leashed to her tree stub. She seemed restless and pulled at her tethers. Then I realized that the forest was dead quiet. Even the woodpeckers that had been tapping around me all morning were silent. The squirrels were nowhere to be seen. The juncos and chickadees and nuthatchers were gone. I looked to see what the Baron Weasel was doing. He was not around. I looked up. From my tree, you could see the gorge beyond the meadow. White water pours through between the black, wet boulders and cascades into the valley below. The water that day was dark as the rocks. Only the sound told me it was still falling. Above the darkness stood another darkness, the clouds of winter, black and fearsome. They looked as wild as the winds that were bringing them. I grew sick with fright. I knew I had enough food. I knew everything was going to be perfectly all right. But knowing that didn't help. I was scared. I stamped out the fire and pocketed the fish. I tried to whistle for Frightful, but couldn't purse my shaking lips tight enough to get anything out but pfft. So I grabbed her by the hides that were attached to her legs, and we dove through the deerskin door into my room in the tree. I put Frightful on the bedpost and curled up in a ball on the bed. I thought about New York and the noise and the lights and how a snowstorm always seems so very friendly there. I thought about our apartment too. At that moment, it seemed bright and lighted and warm. I had to keep saying to myself, there were 11 of us in it. Dad, Mom, 4 sisters, 4 brothers, and me. And not one of us liked it, except perhaps little Nina, who was a bit too young to know. 11 siblings? Can you imagine, or 11 people in one apartment? Can you imagine living with that many people? Do you think this played a role in why Sam decided to leave New York? Dad didn't like it even a little bit. He had been a sailor once, but when I was born, he gave up the sea and worked on the docks in New York. Dad didn't like the land. He liked the sea, wet and big and endless. Sometimes he would tell me about great-grandfather Gribley, who owned the land in the Catskill Mountain and felled trees and built a home and plowed the land, only to discover that he wanted to be a sailor. The farm failed and great-grandfather Gribley went to sea. As I lay with my face buried in the sweet, greasy smell of my deerskin, I could hear Dad's voice saying, "That land is still in the family's name. Somewhere in the Catskills is an old beach with the name Gribley carved on it. It marks the northern boundary of the Gribley's Folly. The land is no place for Gribley." "The land is no place for Gribley," I said. "The land is no place for Gribley. And here I am, 300 feet from the beach with Gribley carved on it." I fell asleep at that point, and when I awoke, I was hungry. I cracked some walnuts and got down the acorn flour I had pounded, with a little bit of ash to remove the bite. Reached out the door for a little snow and stirred up some acorn pancakes. I cooked them on top of a tin can, and as I ate, smothered with blueberry jam, I knew that the land was just the place for a Gribley. Think about that conversation between Sam and his dad. If no one in his family has lived in the wilderness, how has he learned all these survival skills? Sam narrates this. That was the first chapter of My Side of the Mountain, and we learned that we heard him narrate his experience of the first snowstorm in the mountains and the emotions that he felt as he was going through that first snowstorm. We also learned about what his home in the tree looks like and the area his camp surrounds. In our journals for Chapter 1, I would like you all to draw a picture of Sam's home from the details we got from this book. Make sure that you go back and look in your books so that you can find accurate details to put in your drawings. I would also like for you to write down on the next page of your journal, all of the different characters we have been introduced to so far. I will give you a hint. There are 4. My Side of the Mountain. As we read Chapter 1 of My Side of the Mountain, the first chapter was a great start to the story and really set up the background information as we get better prepared for the rest of our story that we will learn. We have been able to see some of Sam's emotions at being alone in the Catskill Mountains and his history of his time in New York. I really hope you guys like the beginning of this novel, and I am super excited to see how Sam has survived on this mountain all alone for a whole year. Thank you. I'll see you next time.